all of these changes happen, after all these early changes happen, this is when decomposition proper sets in. So decomposition. Decomposition is the degradation of bodily tissues. During life, biochemical processes preserve the integrity of cellular membranes and organelles and all that sort of stuff. After death, those cell enzymes will leak out and microorganisms are no longer killed. So that's when we start to see these decompositional changes. In its earliest forms, we just looked at it, it's autolysis. That is when just the enzymes will leak outward. It then moves on to putrefaction. Putrefaction is decomposition changes produced by bacteria and microorganisms. Then we have animal feeding. So animal feeding is the destruction of body or these major body tissues by animals. So things like, coyotes, I think they eat carrion, vultures, especially crows, anything, hyenas in certain areas. Have you seen that awesome video of the hyena eating the elephant? Yeah. All right. So all of these different animals feeding on carrion, that causes this animal destruction, major removal of bodily tissues by other animals. Okay. Now going through the basic stages of putrefaction. So this putrefaction, this decomposition can be broken up into major stages based on physical changes to the animal. Now, this is a slight point of controversy. There have been many, many works that have attempted to quantify decompositional stages. And they range anywhere from 3 stages to 20 or so. 20 discrete stages of decomposition. The problem with attempting to quantify something like decomp is it's a continuum. There are many different tissues, and they could be in different stages at the same time. So you could have, the skin that is still looking fresh while the GI tract has started its autolytic changes. You can have the stomach that is going into decomp while the lungs are still looking really good. You can have parts of it that are mummified while other things are actively decomposing. So trying to break this down into certain stages is a real problem in my mind. And you'll see a lot of decompositional studies where they look at these waves of insects that show up. They look at succession. They look at how this body decomposes, and they try to relate it to a stage of putrefaction. And that can cause a problem because they say, flies show up in the fresh stage. But then that can change depending on all manner of really complex issues. Biology is complicated. So looking at these stages of putrefaction, many of these stages are characterized by qualifying terms. Things like color or liquidity, anything that happens, and that whenever you try to quantify something using qualifiers, then you have an issue. Now, decomposition starts out at the fresh stage, and this can happen anytime between 0 to 3 hours after death, and it looks fresh from the outside. That animal looks like it just died. Inside, however, the bacteria are beginning to digest the intestines, the surrounding organs, and autolysis begins. So you'll get a different story about this process of decomposition depending on who you read, who it is that is talking about these changes. I'm simply going to go over the major terms and approximate times of decomposition. Keep this in mind. Keep it in mind that these terms change depending on all manner of ridiculously complex things happening to this body. Also keep that in mind when you hear people talking about the stages of death on the court stand, or when they're talking about, these insects only show up during the putrefaction stage or whatever. Keep it in mind that it's a continuum, that it's very, very complex, and we have not quantified completely when one stage ends and the next stage begins. Okay, just to make this really, really complex. So starting out the fresh stage. Looks fresh from the outside. You may see some decomposition on the inside. Putrefaction begins between 4 and 10 days after death. This stage is characterized by a buildup of gases inside the body, which cause bloating, especially of the abdomen. There's a greenish discoloration of tissues beyond livor mortis. So livor mortis is that sort of reddish, sometimes brownish, maybe green coloration. There's this discoloration beyond that liver. This is caused by the breakdown of hemoglobin by bacteria. When that iron-rich hemoglobin is broken down, we get this green color as a result. So this stage is characterized by a puffing up of tissues called bloat and purging of fluids from the nose and the mouth. Next comes active decay. So this is also known as black putrefaction. This is a really stinky part of putrefaction. This occurs 10 to 20 days after death. This is when the bloated body will collapse. It tends to leave flattened body. The flesh has a creamy consistency. The exposed parts of the body tend to be black in coloration. You can see on this pig that that head area is turning a really, really dark color, hence the name black putrefaction in some things. There's a very strong smell of decay. Notice all of those flies that are on this pig right here? Yeah, this is where entomologists come in. Huzzah! The strong smell of decay. There are large volumes of bodily fluids that will drain from the body at this stage. They'll seep into the surrounding soil. Other insects and mites will feed on this surrounding seepage. So this is when we start to see adventive species or accidental species who come in like, hey, fluids, thanks. That really have not a lot to do with the body. Insect activity is very, very apparent in this case. We'll talk about that during the succession lectures, but this is where we come in, and it smells horrible. You also see some skin slippage. So notice here on this body, look at all that right there. See that? That is that outer layer of skin slipping off of this body. So it'll come off the appendages intact. This is called gloving. In humans, you can take off the full hand or the full skin of the hand of the body and wear it like a glove and use it to fingerprint. Or, you know, if you're a serial killer and kind of a freak, just wear it like a glove. Whatever. Thanks, Silence of the Lambs, for putting that in my head. At this time, fur will also drop off the animal. So this is called the fur or the hair droppage time of decomposition. Next, butyric fermentation. This will last from 20 to 50 days after death. During this time, all remaining flesh is removed and the body begins to dry out. It has a cheesy smell. This is called by this butyric acid. The smell attracts a new group of organisms. So the first time, awesome. First time I really smelled this awesome cheesy smell, it smells exactly like Parmesan cheese. It's amazing. We were doing these decomposition experiments with these pigs hanged from trees. And we were looking at the major changes in decomposition from a hanging body that was 5 to 10 feet off the ground versus those bodies that were closer to the ground versus those that were actively on the ground. We wanted to see the major difference between the insect activity on these animals. And so we go out to this field site and there's all these pigs hanging from the trees. And we walk out there and it's, like 10, 15, 20, whatever days into this experiment. And step one, the fluids purging from the hanging pigs made it sound like rain underneath the trees. And all I could think was, I should get an umbrella and stand under it because, that's what you do. And then second, it was this overwhelming smell of putrefaction and then Parmesan. And we're out there, it's around lunchtime, and all of us on this team were looking around going, we're hungry. I really want some food. And then you think about it for a minute and go, this is gross. And I swear it was the exact smell of Parmesan. It was amazing and super sick. And now every time I smell Parmesan, I think about dead rotting things, which you get used to. And you go, okay, yeah, it smells delicious. Gross. So this is the Parmesan cheese stage. Yay. All right. Anyhow, so it has that cheesy smell. It attracts a whole new group of organisms. And the surface of the body that is in contact with the ground becomes covered with mold as the body ferments. So you get a very moldy body at this point. Next, dry decay sets in. So dry decay can last between 50 and 365 days after death. So big range there. The body tissues have dried out. The decay starts very slowly. So that's why it can take upwards of a year to go through this dry decay stage. Eventually, all the hair associated with the body, all the fur, will disappear. The body is considered to be in dry decay as long as traces of hair remains or traces of fur remain. So you can come across a body completely dried out. It's still in dry decay as long as there's fur there. Now, this is dependent upon the amount of hair that covers a particular species naturally. Pigs and humans have relatively little hair. Cold weather animals such as bears, wolves, elk, etc. will last a much longer time in dry decay than pigs, say. Finally is skeletonization. So this lasts from when the very last bit of hair is removed from the body until the bones finally completely disintegrate. And this can take years. This can take forever and ever and ever. Now, depending on the type of the animal, the temperature, the circumstances surrounding death, the time of year, all that sort of stuff, this entire process from fresh to skeletonization can take just a few days to several years. So, general rules of thumb, in temperate areas, such as, California, Midwest type areas, areas where it's pleasant outside, this can take up to a year and a half. Okay, so a decent amount of time to go from fresh to skeletonization. In hot, humid areas like where I live, it can take as little as 10 days. During the summer, things go very, very quickly. In certain situations, skeletonization can be an almost indefinite process. So once you reach skeletonization, you can live as a skeleton. You can be a skeleton for a very, very long time. I mean, we're still finding skeletons from ancient Egypt. So the skeletonization time can last a very long time. Bones are primarily minerals. There's a lot of water and other stuff in there, of course, in the living bone. But once it dries out, it's just minerals. And so that can take a long time to erode away. So that's an almost indefinite process under the right circumstances.
All right, that's it. Let me know if you have any questions.